My dear sister, President of Namibia, I speak today not only to thank you, but to honor the truth in your words. Your message was not a political statement, it was a declaration of faith. Faith in Africa, in its people, and in the destiny we must claim for ourselves. You spoke with a conviction.
Citizens bought bonds, expatriates sent remittances, local engineers and regional crews labored for years. The result is more than electricity. It is a statement of sovereignty and self-reliance. Tonight, we trace how Ethiopia financed, built, and began operating Africa's largest dam without turning to traditional international lenders, and why that achievement matters far beyond its turbines and spillways. The story begins with a political and strategic choice. Ethiopia decided to harness the Blue Nile's energy potential on its own terms. Rather than relying on the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, or bilateral loans, Addis Ababa turned inward and upward, mobilizing domestic capital, appealing to the diaspora, and creating a people-centered funding model. Ordinary citizens bought government bonds, families contributed small savings, and expatriates sent funds that, together, financed a multi-billion-dollar mega-project. That financing approach altered the relationship between state, society, and development. The dam became not a foreign project on Ethiopian soil, but a national asset built by Ethiopians for Ethiopia. The scale of the works is monumental. The structure stretches nearly 1.8 kilometers in length and climbs roughly 170 meters in height. Construction consumed millions of cubic meters of concrete, a figure measured in the tens of millions, and created a reservoir capable of holding some 74 billion cubic meters of water. Over 14 years of engineering, excavation, and assembly, the site transformed from scrubland and seasonal river channel into a controlled hydraulic system capable of producing several thousand megawatts of renewable power. Those raw facts matter because they place the project among the largest hydroelectric undertakings on the planet. They also explain why the technical, logistical, and managerial challenges were so large. Delivering reliably dispatched megawatts requires more than a dam wall. Ethiopia invested in turbines, transmission corridors, and regional interconnects so electricity could reach domestic consumers and cross borders. With a target generation capacity in the multiple gigawatts range, the facility is designed to electrify rural communities that lacked any reliable supply, power modern industry, and provide baseload stability for urban centers. Crucially, the plan also envisions surplus generation for export to neighboring states, a shift that changes Ethiopia's economic profile from net energy consumer to regional power provider and trade partner. Financing the project domestically carried several concrete advantages. First, it avoided sovereign debt traps and conditionality that often accompany large external loans. Second, it created a direct psychological and political link between the population and the infrastructure. When citizens contribute to a national bond or donate savings, the asset becomes an expression of collective ownership, not an imposition from abroad. Third, domestic financing broadened political support for reform and for the long-term governance needed to operate such a complex facility. In short, financing at home reinforced sovereignty in both symbolic and fiscal terms. The human dimension of construction is central to the narrative. Engineers, technicians, and skilled workers from Ethiopia and across Africa participated in the project. Professionals from neighboring countries joined survey and construction teams. Local laborers formed the backbone of the workforce. What started as an empty stretch of bushland required access roads, camps, workshops, and supply chains. Every new capability produced jobs, upskilled local populations, and created lasting vocational capacity. Over time, the site became not only a concrete structure, but a training ground for African engineering talent, demonstrating that large-scale technical competency exists on the continent and can be expanded through deliberate investment. Technology and safety standards were not sacrificed for speed or symbolism. The project employed modern turbine technology, spillway control systems, and reservoir management tools designed to balance energy production with environmental and downstream water needs. In operation, the reservoir functions to regulate flow, moderating flood peaks in the rainy season and maintaining more stable releases during dry spells. Ethiopia's engineers emphasize that water stored for electricity is later returned downstream. The primary objective is energy generation rather than diversion. Properly managed, that controlled release can reduce extreme variability in river flow and support agricultural planning in neighboring states. Exporting electricity marks a significant geopolitical shift. By providing power to markets in Sudan, Djibouti, Kenya, and potentially other neighbors, Ethiopia deepens regional integration and creates interdependent infrastructure ties that encourage cooperation. Energy trade converts natural resources into predictable revenue streams, strengthens balance of payments positions, and builds political leverage through mutually beneficial connectivity. In practical terms, cross-border electricity sales provide foreign exchange, stimulate industrial growth among importers, and reinforce diplomatic bonds. A far cry from the extractive, one-way resource relationships that often have characterized external investment in Africa. The project's environmental and social implications deserve candid assessment. Large reservoirs alter local ecologies, affect fisheries, and require resettlement in certain cases. Ethiopia has had to manage these impacts through compensation programs, community engagement, and environmental monitoring. The government's argument is that those short-term disruptions are weighed against long-term benefits, stable power, irrigation potential, flood control, and economic transformation. The test will be whether affected communities see durable improvements in livelihoods and whether ecological safeguards are enforced transparently and effectively. Perhaps the most enduring legacy is psychological. The dam is a symbol of self-help and national resolve. Many Ethiopians compare the project to historic moments of national resistance and pride, not because the engineering itself is novel, but because the financing model and public participation reasserted agency over development. When citizens invest their own money and labor, development becomes an act of citizenship. That transformation reshapes expectations. No longer is large-scale infrastructure only possible with foreign sponsors. State capacity, civic mobilization, and regional professional networks can combine to deliver continental-scale projects. The dam's construction journey also tells a story about logistics and planning. Building a major hydroelectric project on a major river required sequential phases: geological surveys, diversion tunnels, foundation excavation, concrete placement, installation of turbines, and erection of high-voltage transmission lines. Each stage required supply chains for steel, electrical components, heavy machinery, and technical expertise. Mobilizing these resources domestically meant developing procurement strategies that favored local suppliers where possible and carefully managed imports where necessary. The result? Much of the economic value generated by construction was captured inside the national economy through wages, procurement, and local subcontracting. Finally, the political effect is continental. When one African state demonstrates it can fund and deliver a world-class infrastructure asset without external loans, it changes the conversation about development finance across the region. Other governments take notice. The appeal of people-funded bonds, sovereign infrastructure funds, and intra-African partnerships grows. Donor dependency is not simply an economic problem, it is a political constraint.
Projects financed internally expand policy space. They also invite new models of cooperation, from power pools to regional industrial corridors that are negotiated on African terms. The Grand Ethiopian Project is not an uncontroversial miracle. It comes with trade-offs, diplomatic sensitivities with downstream neighbors, and environmental responsibilities that must be carefully managed. But it is also a clear demonstration that large, technically complex, and financially demanding infrastructure is possible through domestic mobilization, regional expertise, and political leadership committed to national ownership. In that sense, the dam is both concrete and covenant, a physical structure that channels water and power, and a social contract that binds citizens to a shared future. As the turbines spin and transmission lines carry light into towns and fields, the broader test begins. Can Ethiopia translate thousands of megawatts into diversified industry, broad-based employment, and durable regional partnerships?